Okay, everyone, I think let's kick off. Other people that are later, I guess they can join in as they will do when they link. So last week we had Ansi Piens on this platform. Ansi, I think you all recall, was the school principal of Sunwood Park High School. She still is the school principal of Sunwood Park High School. But she led the transition from a conventional school into becoming a digital paperless school. And of course, I think what Ansi said to all of us last week was, there's no way that journey is about one person's journey. It's a team sport. It requires, in particular, the educators to step up and embrace the use of technology in their teaching and learning practice. So we were going to have a session, but we were let down at the 11th hour looking at design learning and design thinking, but we've kicked that forward into next week. And I'm very pleased to say that some of the educators of Sunwood Park have stepped up to share with us some of their own personal journey and how they've used the technology in terms of bringing content into the classroom. So it's a slightly different angle that we're going to be talking about today. So Ansi's talk was about how the transition from, let's say, analog to digital. And today's conversation is going to be more from an educator or teacher's perspective as to how they stepped up to the challenge, or let's rather say the opportunity of having access to digital tools to use that in their classroom. So, you know, as always happens, we always do have challenges with technology and people linking. We've definitely got Laurence Keulder on the call. Laurence is a life sciences and physics teacher, covering basically all the grades. But Laurence was one of those stories at Sunwood. He jumped in boots and all when Sunwood went digital and started coming up with some amazing ideas and innovation in his own classroom to find ways to teach basic concepts differently. So very grateful that Laurence is on the call. He was going to have a few colleagues with him, but you know, some of them have had challenges submitting marks, connecting, and so on and so forth. So it might be Laurence alone, but let's see how we go. So I'm going to hand over to Laurence and welcome you. Laurence, I remember when we first met a long time ago, and I imagine your practice has developed quite significantly, you know, over the last 6 years. I haven't remained in contact, but we were aware in our conversation with Ansi that, you know, it takes 5 years to really see the impact of the use of technology in a school. You need to be able to go through a full cycle of grade 8s to grade 12s. And if I understand correctly, you know, that's pretty much where you guys are at. You're beginning to see the first crop of matriculants who have had the benefit of digital through their entire high school career. But maybe you'll share, I see our group is growing slowly, but let me hand over to you, and maybe you can talk a little bit about your journey and some of the things you've learned and some of the tools you've been using to change your teaching practice in the classroom. So over to you.
Okay, so I'm going to share a few things, and you're quite right. The adaptation of technology in schools it takes some time. You've got to have teachers that want to, and then show that it can work. And from where, when other teachers see no, it does work, then from there on, they adopt what you are using. I'm going to share a few things that I do in the classroom. These are only skimming the top of what we're doing in the classroom at the moment. But just to show you, I'm going to share my screen. I'm just going to share a presentation that I've used to present for another group. So it's not adapted to you guys. Just apologies for that. Let me just make sure you are seeing history on the screen right now, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So this is basically, if we take a look at where we are coming from, I mean, from the days, even some of the pictures are from your time, Clifford, that I've just included today. I actually went back and took some looked for some pictures from your days when you were involved at Sunwood. And you can see it's the MacBooks that you guys sponsored at that stage. And we went from there on, we went on to tablets, and we went on to interactive learning. And one of the main things that happened when we started was to get a learning management system in place. Now, when we got a learning management system in place, it just broadened what we could do. And I'm going to show you some.
Laurence, sorry, what do you mean? Laurence, sorry, what do you mean?
Yes.
Just explain a learner management system, because we always throw around this term LMS. What do you actually use it? Just like deconstruct what LMS really is.
Okay, let me show you what ours does, and I think that should tell you what a learning management system then should be able to do. So one of the things that our learning management system does is it creates a timetable for learners and for teachers, a digital timetable that's interactive. So if I normally, this is now, you can see it's tabs up top, and we can actually click on a content tab and publish content for learners, digital content in PDF form, in video form, and which the learners can then go with a tablet or any other device, computer, even a phone, and fetch that content from a server or from the internet. What ours also does is we can automatically, from a classroom management's perspective, we can immediately on the same system, because you don't want to be going in and out of systems the whole time. You can go into a system, you can do your absentees on the same system, you can do your demerits on the same system. The computer does the data capturing for you. So it makes it more user-friendly. Things that you used to do on paper, and there's 100 papers lying everywhere, you're doing it, and it's on the server, it's easy to fetch afterwards. This is just part of the classroom management part of the learner management system, where it just automatically takes register of the learners that walk into your classroom, and you can just then correct whether they are there or not. Now, the idea later is, for example, to use the GPS within tablet so that it automatically picks up that the learner is in your class or not, and you just have to correct the system and make sure that it is getting the learner in your class and showing that they are there.
So on that basis, when a learner logs into the system, it registers that they're present at school. So basically, yes, by them logging in, your attendance register of who's present is taken care of.
It is taken care of. So you don't have to physically mark them and read out their names and check that they're there. It does it for you. Another function that we have that they're trying to incorporate now is that when we write things on the whiteboard, on the interactive whiteboard in front, is that the learners already have any notes that you are writing directly on their tablet. So I don't even have to publish notes anymore that for them to fetch from a server. It automatically updates on the system and updates on their tablet that you have written notes on the board, and they have the notes that you just taught from directly. Then this is one of the main things for me in terms of learning management system, is that you have what we call interactive content. Now, when we talk about interactive content, we, for example, would play a video, and in the video, there would be a question coming up. And you can see on this, I can only show you pictures at the moment because the streaming will not handle both pictures as well as video. But when the learners do it, the video plays, and then at each of these dots, there's a question. And then the question comes up and asks the learner the question, and they need to answer the question, type in the question. It could be multiple choice questions. It could be short answers, like just a fill-in question here. And what's nice here is that I can then design the program when I'm setting up this lesson that if they give a wrong answer, it rewinds a few seconds and replays that section of work again to make sure that they understand and then give the right answer. Once they give the right answer, it moves on to the rest of the video. And so you want that type of interactive content.
Laurence, are they watching this as a class, or they're watching it individually?
No, they're watching this individually because you want the interaction of each individual learner. This can't be a presentation system. Presentations you can do in the front of the class, and you're going to ask the class, what is the answer? And Donnie Smart is going to answer, and the rest of the class is going to keep quiet. Or they're all going to say, I know the answer, but they don't really know the answer. With this, you know each and every learner is going to have to answer, and you're going to get the stats on your side to see, how is your class doing? Is there, you're going to get an average, you're going to see what questions have they got wrong, what questions that they have to go through 2 or 3 times, so you can pick up where there's misunderstandings very early on in your teaching, not after they've written a test and after you've marked the test.
So through this tool, you have a real-time understanding of how much the learners understand of the concept, and you understand in the class where their weaknesses and where the strengths are. You've got a very real understanding of the class.
Correct. That's exactly what you've got. And what's nice is that for me, it's so instant. I immediately, the moment that they've gone through it, within 5 minutes after they've gone through it, I could have checked where did they go wrong, and I could have already gone through the work and then recapped on the sections where I know there was misunderstanding. I don't have to wait 2, 3, 4 weeks after they've done the test to pick that up. Okay, so that's basically a learning management system, and that's mainly what it does. And then also, I want to just speak about just how we start getting creative afterwards. If we take a look, here's a picture of the interactive table at the back of my class. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a good picture. I've lost some of my stuff that I previously had when I lost my previous computer. And I started since then going online and storing everything online. But over here, you've got a projector shining onto a table, and I do experiments on the table. So I would have, for example, a scale here, and I would do an acid-base test, and I can directly on the scale evaluate when the color changes on here. I can evaluate. Let me just go to a different part of the video. You can see there's color changes over here according to acidity, and then I can place that according to the color change onto a scale on the board. So it's making it interactive, making the whole experiment and combining both. You're doing blended learning. You're taking something that's digital and you're using something that's practical, and you're blending them together into one. I've also done lessons on here where we, for example, do, and unfortunately I don't have photos of that anymore, and during lockdown I couldn't take any new photos after losing my computer, but I had skeletons on here, or parts of a skeleton on here. Also I had 3D models on here that was printed off, for example, Homo naledi, which was made available by Wits University within hours after they made the announcement about Homo naledi. You could actually print a physical copy of parts of the Homo naledi skeleton. And I had a lesson over here where we compared the Homo naledi skeleton with other skeletons or other skeleton parts that I had lying at the back of my storeroom. So that's where we, I think it's, if you take a look at some of the concepts that's been going around the past few years, blended learning, learning management systems, and a flipped classroom, because if you go back to these questions, this could be a flipped classroom. They could do this the previous day, and when they walk into your classroom, you can actually already know and design your next lesson to know where they went wrong already from the homework that they did.
Let me just deconstruct the term of the flipped classroom. So the idea of the flipped classroom is that the primary learning happens at home. Because the kids have got access to the lesson on their tablet, they do the lesson the day before they come to school, let's say, for example. So when they come to school, they're already familiar with the lesson, the contents, and even ask some questions. So when the teacher meets them the next day, you're already starting from a premise that the kids already have got the primary content. And there's the notion of the flip the classroom, is instead of doing homework at home, they're doing the primary work at home, and they're doing the refreshing work the next day at school, or however it works.
And that gives you the opportunity to pay attention not only to the problems or misconceptions that the kids are having, but to give individual attention to those learners that are struggling. So instead of presenting or doing a presentation in front of the class, you are actually interacting with the learners with whatever concepts they are struggling with, not with the whole concept, because most of the concept they might get, but you're focusing on those things that they get wrong. Yeah, and that's I know this was quite quick, but that's basically my presentation for today. I don't know if there's any questions from anybody that would like to maybe ask about how we do things. Unfortunately, I don't have more examples with today. I've been marking, and I've only was told that I was going to present on Tuesday.
So Laurence, before I throw it open, so let's just recap. So this is what you've been doing at Sunwood Park. Now,
this is what we've been doing at Sunwood Park. And also we've been developing. As you go along, you see, okay, I need this, I need that, and you try and compensate for those needs. So at Sunwood, we've been designing our own learning management system, and it's constantly under development, so that where I see the need, I can adapt my learning management system to my needs, like taking registration, like taking the demerits. Because initially when we started off with Moodle, and Moodle was great, but Moodle only allowed us to get about 300 learners on, and we're about 1,800 learners at Sunwood at the moment. And so Moodle didn't work for us. It had its limitations. It wasn't very user-friendly at that stage. So it took quite a bit of training. And so you try and make your systems as user-friendly as possible, and you also try to make it as cheap and sustainable as possible, because some of the learning management systems out there can be quite expensive.
So again, let's recap. To make this possible, every learner in the school has to have a tablet or a device.
Correct.
Every teacher has to be onboarded, willing to use a laptop and use a smartboard and to use the learner management system, and to start exploring using digital tools, the way they're going to present their lessons.
The only thing that I differ from you there is when you say every teacher. Eventually, every teacher is going to. But when you start out, what you need to, I think the best type of way to do that is to get your champion teachers. You get 5 or 6 champion teachers that drives it like crazy. And once they see, and that's what happened with us with Moodle, we had 2 or 3 teachers that used it. And then it worked wonderfully. And when everybody else saw the results we were getting and the effect it was having, then everyone wanted to be on board. Then it was easy. But that takes time.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm saying is, if you want to go fully digital, then everybody, so you're talking, there's a transition period.
Yes.
where maybe a group of teachers starts to embrace technology in their classrooms and works in smaller groups. But ultimately, if you want to become a fully digital school, everyone has to be with the program.
Everybody has to go, yeah. And it's becoming more and more easily as we get along. The term that they used to use, where people were BBTs, were born before technology, there's less and less of them within the classes. Most of us have had exposure of different degrees with technology, and it's only the very almost retiring teachers that hasn't had this type of exposure in the classroom, maybe.
Now you've spoken from the perspective of the teacher. It's helped you with registration, it's helped you with the demerits, it's helped you with assessing exactly where the kids are in the class. But if you spoke about it from the learner's perspective, how do you think have they responded to learning this way? And are you seeing it in a greater commitment to learning, more interest, more creativity, more inquiry? What are you seeing? What are you observing when you look at the learners?
They're very excited once you get started with it. But sometimes when they realize that, okay, but now somebody's constantly checking up on me, somebody's constantly knowing what I'm doing, then sometimes there's a bit of a hesitation, and you have to get over that. what I've seen in the results of learners is that, for example, when I ask a lot of short questions on my learning management systems, when I have a lot of short questions that I'm asking, immediately the results in my short questions escalate. So they just, it's not even comparable. There's about a 20 to 30% difference in your multiple choice questions and, for example, your terminology questions that I'm finding. Terminology is sometimes a very bad section that the kids struggle with. But the moment you put that in an everyday lesson and every day they do a digital terminology test, then suddenly those marks go up tremendously. And it's sections that they used to struggle with. Your very good learners embrace all of it all the time. And what I find, for example, to get my less enthusiastic learners involved is that's why I have things like the interactive table, because then you're getting your tactile learners involved, then you're getting your visual learners involved. And especially with the interactive table where it's tactile, they build circuits on here and they love to use it. They can't wait for a lesson to do this. It just makes it, and you can actually do it without the table, but it just makes it, for me, the organization of it, so much more easy with the table on there. If I can, for example, project a circuit diagram and tell them, build the circuit on top of the circuit diagram. So it just makes it so much more easier for me, makes my management of my classroom easier, but then gets that tactile learner that's not necessarily wanting to read through the material or to watch the video, and it gets him involved as well.
So, Laurence, it sounds like some would manage this quite well, but I mean, before you went on this journey, you were quite a well-resourced school. You're a former Model C school. You did have resources in terms of, teachers and money. The parents agreed to buy, tablets or devices for their kids. So that's in a former Model C environment. I think in our public schools, it's unlikely. There are a number of challenges before we get to this level. I think this is almost showing why our public schools are maybe falling more and more behind, because if kids are getting access to these sorts of tools and this level of information in better resourced schools, then of course the kids are going to fall further behind in the poorer schools. And I think that was really amplified at COVID, where,
yes,
schools with resources like yours were almost able to carry on teaching even though the kids weren't at school. Whereas the public schools were basically shut down and all learning and teaching stopped.
And I think another major problem that we're finding is that even with our current systems at Sunward, is not just money-wise, but in terms of internet access, to get internet access sorted on such a level that everybody can watch a video online and not from a server. That's what we finally need. And that takes a lot of, unfortunately, that type of internet takes quite a bit of expense. But if you're talking about expense for schools as well, or expense for parents that are maybe not so well resourced, we also need to educate our parents in terms of how they do things. Especially our parents that cannot afford data. They would buy data by the gig. So they buy 1 gig now and maybe a gig in 2 weeks' time. And then once you have interactive lessons, they can't afford to do these interactive lessons. They can't afford to do Zoom meetings like we are at the moment. But by the time that they paid for 3 gigs of data, they could have bought and kept at a lesser price. And so we need to educate people on how they spend their money in terms of technology. What tablet do they have to buy? They don't need to buy the most expensive, but they need to buy a good quality that's going to last. If they're buying internet for their child, they need to think, okay, I should go uncapped at a reasonable price of 250 rands a month, although I can only use it during the day. At least my child can use it.
So Panyaza Lesufi sort of led the charge to try and create, digital schools in say township or public schools. Do you have a sense of what happened in those schools? Has the program actually succeeded? I've actually heard nothing. There there was a lot of noise, and schools were getting tablets, they were getting smart boards, they were getting a whole bunch of stuff. Do you have any sense whether any of those schools managed to pull it off and sustain digital teaching and learning?
Unfortunately, we haven't kept the relationships with those schools, because we were part of the first schools that were helping initiate in other schools those implementations when he started with that. And unfortunately, we haven't, as from an educator side, kept as the contact with those schools. I know there was lots of hesitation in the beginning, and I can understand it from some teachers, because I've seen it at Sunward as well. As a teacher, you are kept responsible for whatever resources are in your classroom. So then you get too scared to possibly use some of the things that you're given, to possibly use a tablet, because what if one of the kids walk out with one of the tablets, and then I'm kept responsible for it? Or what if I use this board and I break it? So there's always a human side to it that needs to be overcome, and that fear that needs to be overcome when you implement things like this. And I think all the more in the schools that are not well resourced, because then they cannot replace things if something goes wrong.
So, Laurence, I don't think you're necessarily familiar with what we're doing with the 5 schools that you're currently talking to, but I'm going to ask you a question which you probably haven't had a chance to think about. But what we've done is we have created Wi-Fi hotspots in the schools, and we are providing unlimited data at these hotspots. Now, the hotspots do not cover the entire school. They do not cover every classroom, but it is a gateway. It's a point of access that learners and teachers have access to data at no charge. Now, if that is all you had, right? So this is the question. If that is all you had, this was your beginning of your journey to leverage off internet access in your school, what would you do? What would your priority be? What type of lesson, what would you think of doing? You're clearly not in every classroom. You're not with every teacher. There's only some parts of the school that have got coverage and access. What type of things could you think of that could be the beginning of your journey to starting to leverage off this access to this data?
What I would do is I would set up Google Classrooms. I would then go into my Google Classrooms and make sure that I put my content on the Google Classroom so that people have the digital content that they can get. And then for me, what is going to be the groundbreaking thing that you will do is that you will then go into the assignment quizzes and you'll set up electronic tests, short tests, because you're going to get instant feedback all the time. You're going to get quicker feedback. You're going to get people involved. You're going to get people in. You're going to get your learners to recap the work, and you're going to get feedback constantly without you having, as a teacher, to mark small tests the whole time, or to possibly even get into something like get the school LMS on board and get the digital school LMS. Just so you can get those little tests the whole time. And those tests, those short tests, you don't need much bandwidth for the test. It's not like the little test we have here where you have the video and you have questions. But if you can have in this like on the school LMS or on Google Classroom, you can have small tests that the kids can automatically fill in after each lesson. 10, 15 mark tests that you can constantly get them to engage with the content, and you get constant feedback on whether they understand the work or not.
So,
that's the
so
way
if you set up a Google Classroom, the idea would be, let's say you've got a grade 8A. You would set up a grade 8A Google Classroom and register all the students in that class into that classroom.
No, you would register for a Google Classroom. You would say, for example, say grade 8 Natural Sciences.
Okay.
And use for your specific subject, and you can load about 250 people, or you can go, for example, and do it via school LMS, because the problem that we have with, for example, Google Classroom is that you can only get 250 learners in a classroom. then you need to create a second one. Well,
okay,
with something like...
But still, let's run with that for a second. So you created Google Classroom for Life Sciences Grade 8, and all the students who are doing Life Sciences Grade 8 register into that classroom. Now, you say you as the teacher, then you upload your notes or your lessons. Now, all of those students have got access through that classroom to the notes and lessons. Then you upload these little tests, and every one of those students can complete those little tests and get the marks and the feedback immediately. So like working their muscle in terms of life sciences. So they can read the notes, they can do the test, and they can see themselves how they're progressing.
And it's regular testing then. It's constant testing. It's every day, 10 to 15 marks. And they get those things into their long-term memory, and you get the instant feedback to see where there's misconceptions very quickly before you go into the next day's lesson.
Okay, so look, that's an interesting idea. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw the discussion open, and let's see where the discussion takes. So if anyone's got any questions or any ideas that you want to bounce off Laurence, you know, on your screen you've got a raise hand. So press the raise hand and we'll just hand over the talking rights to you. But I think Laurence has shared some interesting insights. And let's see if anyone wants to raise anything. So the floor is open.
Laurence, I have a question. I want to know, in terms of the effort required on the parts of the teacher, how much effort was put in upfront versus over the next, you know, using that content over the next few years, you know, the relative.
Okay, it takes quite a bit of preparation. It is hours and hours of work, but it's work you've done once, and for the next few years, it's work that you don't repeat again. It's going to remain there the whole time, and you can just reuse the work, and you can adjust it if you want to use it again without much trouble after that. But the initial work it's quite a bit. It takes quite a bit of effort.
But Laurence, do teachers share resources? Is there anywhere you could go, for example, to borrow or access, let's say back to that grade 8 life sciences? Is there any resource you could just go to and get some of that content in tests that have already been made before?
Not that I know of, and it would be great if it can go that direction. And one of the things that they're trying to do at our school, the school LMS, is that if a teacher creates content, then they put out the content there, and the more the content is used, there's an incentive then that the teacher gets to say, okay, gets a little reward, like a e-book or like a rewards program where you can later then use that. The more that people use your lessons, similar to what people would do with when they watch a YouTube video, and you maybe sell some advertisement through there, and then you can get an incentive for teachers to get paid, and to actually put more and more and put nice resources up, because then you don't get paid for the resource itself, you get paid for the amount of times that it gets used.
Okay, the floor is open. Any questions or insights from anyone else in the group?
Dr. Clifford, can I ask a question?
Sure. Who's speaking?
Mr. Chowdhury.
Carry on.
Yeah, I just want to quickly check with Laurence. How long does it take to set up the learner management system?
Okay, the learning management system can be, look, you're going to have some technicians going in and having to set that up. You need some technical expertise with any learning management system. If you contact Sunward and talk about their school LMS, maybe that's a good idea. They can give you a better indication, and maybe speak to them. They'll guide you there. But remember that once the learning management system is in place, your teachers have to physically go in there and create the lessons on there. They have to put the content on there. They have to put the questions in there. And now for a single lesson, for somebody that is experienced with technology, for me, for a lesson, it takes me about, I would say, an hour, hour and a half to set up a very, very good lesson. But you got to also think that somebody might not be as experienced with, but then you get your most experience. Not everybody in grade 8 that's teaching the subject has to set up the lesson. If you have one teacher and you put them in charge of a single subject for that grade, they can set up the lesson and all of the other teachers can use that. And then then you assign somebody else for grade 10 life sciences, for example. And that's what we've done. We've assigned a specific teacher to a grade and a subject. They set it up and everybody uses the same content. So not everybody has to set up their own lessons all the time.
I do think there's a different conversation when you're doing this across the whole school and you're at that level versus when you're starting to play with technology. And I think in our schools with the hotspots, we're at the beginning of the journey, and it's maybe about learning to play and have fun and do these things which draws the kids and the teachers in. But see this as the beginning of a journey. We're all going to have to learn. You know, Sunwood, it wasn't an overnight success.
No, definitely not.
You know, so it does take time, but they've got the benefit now of looking backwards. But who are our usual guests who at least are brave enough to talk? Wendy, your school's gone quite digital. Where are you in the journey? How far are you in terms of embracing technology in your school?
No, I'm glad that we have joined Piermont earlier. And we're one of the schools that was highlighted, actually earmarked by Panyaza Lusufi to have a head start. We are not very bad at all, but I think with the Vulametlo assistance, we're moving forward very quickly. I'm glad today that we could learn that we can. I never heard of schools LMS. It's for the first time I hear about it. I still need to know about more about it. I don't know which one between it and the Google Classroom is user friendly, and we want to know from the gentleman which one needs us to pay money so that we can be able to do as much as we can next year. I'm planning for next year already. And then we are planning to give some learners some tablets, but to limited number of tablets, so that teachers can move from class to class with the tablets. So I will be happy if I can have this opportunity to communicate with Sunwood Park to assist us as much as possible in having a start, a powerful start like they did. But generally speaking, we're still happy. We're doing very well. The majority of my teachers are young and they love technology. Those who are about to exit, they are also embracing it. But you know that they're embracing it with one foot outside of the school. So I'm happy. Thank you.
Wendy, if I can share with you an insight of the journey we've all walked, you remember that in 2010, we actually put fixed computer labs in the schools. And like in today's age, a fixed computer lab makes no sense. You remember the problem with that is that the classes had to move in and out. You could only have 40 kids at a time, and that the technology was contained in a single classroom. Then we moved to the notion of the mobile lab, where the idea was we could move a kit of whatever, 15 or 20 iPads into different classrooms at different times so that teachers could create interesting lessons. Then, of course, we moved that for the teachers to do that, they needed to be familiar with technology and a laptop so they could create interesting lessons. And now we've moved where everybody has a device. And I think we're in the world where it's much more flexible, it's much more individual. We're in the world that assumes everybody's got a device, everyone has access to learning material and can learn at their own rate and at their own pace. And if I just think of that journey, it's just how quick technology keeps shifting and how the way we would approach teaching will keep changing.
Yes. No, I'm having a big meeting with parents. I don't know whether lockdown regulations will allow me, because I was very excited last week to try and cajole parents now to say, please guys, if you can, buy the cheapest of the phones now, smartphones, because there are those that are not very expensive. We can have a smartphone of about 700 rand. I think many parents can afford, really. Those cannot afford, then you can see how we support them as a school. And SGP must put money aside. Fortunately, the government says that we don't have to buy paper books anymore. If we want to plan for digitizing of the school, we can always move away from the paper, go to the gadgets. So I'm still thinking of a way of assisting the learners that may not necessarily afford. But those who can afford, really, I think we do have about 40% of them. Their parents can even buy the smartest of the phones. But I will have to ask them so that they don't always wait for us to give them things, no? The cap in hand type of mantra. So we are going to have a meeting with them to say, 2021, we are going fully digital. And let's see how far we can go. I've got powerful teachers. I've got teachers who are very experienced. I've got, like Mensafio is a qualified digital computer science teacher. So I'm thinking that we can use those resources to our benefit.
You must remember, though, to warn the parents, which Laurence touched on, the one cost is the tablet, and you should buy at least a reasonably robust tablet that can last 3 to 5 years. The other one is the monthly cost of buying data. And they should remember that's definitely worth planning for. You know, if they could have unlimited data at home, and that might be, I think Laurence was saying, about 250 Rand a month. Because then that unlocks the ability for the kids to learn at home and at school. So it is a cost you should keep in the back of your mind to just forewarn them that it is a cost that might be coming.
Yeah. No, I will be able to, when we discuss with parents, I'll be able to gauge and see how far we can go. But at school itself, during the day, we'll have no excuse, because every classroom, every person will have access to internet. So at school itself, we don't have problems. But maybe if they are supposed to work at home, maybe we need to see how far the parents can assist us. We don't want to create a situation where we buttress the inequality, you know, because there are kids whose parents can afford. But we don't want to leave the other ones out, you know, the ones that are struggling financially. So we'll have to see how we navigate everything. But I'm thinking very loudly, so maybe one day I can get another sponsorship for them.
Yeah, well, keep dreaming. Is there anyone else going to share on this platform?
Okay.
Can I just add on because the internet is worrying me at the school. Just remember that although we might have internet access to everybody at the school, schools have to check their bandwidth. Bandwidth, suddenly when you divide it between teachers, and it's only 50 teachers, you might find that the internet speed is nice and quick. But the moment you're dividing that internet speed between 800 learners, that bandwidth can drop very quickly.
Yeah. So bandwidth is like water flowing through a pipe, and if you open up too many taps, then the pressure drops in all of them.
Yeah.
Chauke, you've gone unmute. You want to ask something or say something?
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask Laurence to say what have been the other challenges besides the issue of the bandwidth. I just want to understand what strategy did they actually use to try and get more educators to participate, because in his statement, he started with quite a few educators, but I want to understand that a lot of people now have literally joined in. What has been the strategy that Sanot Park has been using to get everyone to participate in the entire project?
You get, look, I'm not saying that all our strategies always work. You try, take different angles, and especially with people, because it's for me, technology in schools is not just about the technology. It's getting that acceptance from everybody to adopt the technology. And for me, always the best strategy to try and do that is getting a few teachers that shows how it works and how well it can work. And every time we've seen that, we show that it does work, suddenly everybody wanted to do it. And that's always for me the best to do, is to choose a few teachers that want to go on board, get them to put their best into it, and then showcase how well it works. And then once teachers see the benefit, then they get on board. But if you don't see the benefit for them, if it doesn't make it easier for the teacher as well, you've got to try and let them see the positives, in terms of it's going to be easier for you in the long run. And once you can show that it's easier for them in the long run, you're going to get acceptance from the teachers.
Anyone else care to comment or raise a point? You know, when Laurence talks about a Google Classroom or LMS, what we are all doing right now is we're on a Zoom call, and you can download the Zoom app and have a 40-minute call at no charge. And you could be running a digital classroom where the teacher can be calling in from a location in the school. The kids could be out in the garden, and you could be playing with technology, you know. So I think one of the things to be is not scared of it, and to begin and be open to, you know, a playful learning journey. You'll learn a lot from your kids. The kids are much more connected and in touch with how to use technology than most of us are. And it's a journey worth taking, but you know, it's a journey you take one step at a time. You need to cross the line and say, this is something I'm willing to try. It is going to be new. It is going to be different. You are going to have setbacks, but you may also discover some things that you never imagined. And I guess the journey we're all on is how to create a more enabling learning and teaching environment, is to find that place where we can meet the kids, to inspire them to want to learn more, to reach beyond their current capabilities. So I think, given that no one wants to add anything further, maybe Laurence, in closing, do you want to just share some closing comments?
Yeah, just got any journey like this. It's daunting because it's something new, but it's completely worthwhile. And if we don't go this direction, we're going to lose our learners more and more. They don't live in the same world as we grew up in. They live in a world that's constantly changing, and we need to change with them, and learn from your kids. If let them help you. If there's something that goes wrong with technology in the classroom, the learners are more than willing. They don't laugh at you. They do help you with all the love in the world. So yeah, don't be scared of this. We have to do it.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. I mean, I hope you all found this useful. The fact is, each one of your schools has this hotspot, and you have access to this data, and you maybe need to find and develop your own journey and begin walking the walk and seeing what you can do with your learners together in accessing and using that data. We, for our side, remain committed to hosting the Thoughtful Thursdays, where it's an opportunity to share and learn from each other. We committed to still offering your learners access to the Caribou e-learning app, which they can use for extra lessons. And I think as soon as the time is right, we will start doing the live streamed past matric paper lessons as well. So all of those are beginning to use this digital access. There are 3 initiatives we all working together on: access to extra lessons on the app, access to this forum where we can have conversations to learn from each other, and then of course the live streamed lessons. And that's a good starting point. So maybe, you know, you guys need to go and dig around and see where you'd like to start. I think Laurence has given you an interesting pointer about maybe setting up a Google Classroom and seeing how that works, seeing how the kids respond to it. And let's see how we go from there.